My mother slapped me across the face at my own wedding. One second, I was standing beneath the chapel lights at Quantico in marine dress blues, holding Aaron's hands while the chaplain spoke about better and worse. The next, my head snapped sideways. My lower lip split against my teeth. I tasted blood before I felt pain. One dark drop landed on the white collar beneath my coat. Nearly 180 people went silent. My mother, Margaret Barrett, stood less than a foot away from me, breathing hard in a gray coat I had not expected to see anywhere near that base. I had not invited her. Before I could say her name, Aaron stepped between us. Not dramatically, not violently. Just immediately. "Ma'am," she said, voice flat and controlled. "Step away from my husband." Two Marines from the Provost Marshal's office were already moving up the aisle. My mother looked at her own hand as if she had only just realized what it had done. That detail stayed with me. She did not look satisfied. She looked directed. 3.5 hours separated her house in Salem from Quantico. She had not driven a highway in years. She did not have an invitation. She did not know how to use an online wedding portal. And nobody walks onto a Marine Corps installation because grief suddenly gives them gate access. Somebody had submitted her information. Somebody had gotten her through the clearance process. Somebody had put her in a car and delivered her to that chapel at almost the exact moment our vows began. As PMO escorted her toward the rear doors, she looked back at me once. Not triumphant. Confused. Then I saw a movement through the vestibule glass. A woman with a dark ponytail turning away before security reached her. My younger sister, Brooke. I did not understand yet why she had brought her mother there. I only knew this. The slap was not the beginning. It was the first visible piece of something that had been happening for years. And by the time I understood the rest, the blood on my collar would be the least important evidence in the case. My name is Cole Barrett. I was 34 when I got married, a captain in the United States Marine Corps and an aviation logistics officer, the person people called when aircraft needed parts, fuel, equipment, or people moved somewhere on a deadline that did not care about excuses. I had spent most of my adult life learning that every discrepancy has a source. My family was the one discrepancy I never traced properly. I grew up in Salem, Virginia, in a 2-story house my father kept repairing long after hiring somebody would have been easier. David Barrett could rebuild a carburetor, patch drywall, and somehow make a broken lawn mower become a Saturday family project. He died of a heart attack in 2009. I was 17. After that, there were 3 of us. My mother, Margaret. My younger sister, Brooke. And me. Margaret worked reception at a medical office for almost 30 years. She labeled leftovers, paid bills on the same day every month, and kept spare batteries in 3 different drawers because, according to her, emergencies were only emergencies when nobody prepared for them. Brooke was different. She could make strangers laugh in grocery store lines. Teachers forgave her late assignments. Men bought her drinks before she finished ordering them. I was the quiet one. The kid who counted boxes in the pantry and noticed when the electric bill changed. But the most important person in our family when I was young was my mother's younger brother, Mick. Michael Barrett was a Marine. When I was 12, he was 30 and seemed indestructible. He arrived at our house in a loud truck, carried me around like I weighed nothing, and told me to stand straighter whenever he caught me slouching. "Barrett men don't fold in half," he used to say. Then in 2004, 2 Marines came to our front door. Mick had been killed in Iraq. I watched something inside my mother close that afternoon. Before Mick died, the Marine Corps had been part of him. Afterward, It became the thing that had taken him. She hated uniforms. She hated recruiting commercials. She hated military funerals on television. She never said Mick had made the wrong choice. That would have meant blaming him. So she blamed everything around the choice instead. 6 years later, at 18, I told her I had enlisted. She stood at the kitchen sink with her back to me. For several seconds, all I heard was running water. Then she turned it off. I already buried one man in that uniform. Mom, I will not bury my son in it too. I told her I was not asking permission. That was the wrong sentence. She turned around then. Her face was not angry. It was terrified. You choose that life, she said. You do not ask me to celebrate it. 3 weeks later, I left. She did not attend my boot camp graduation. I started in aviation supply, made sergeant, then staff sergeant. I took college classes at night between exercises and deployments until I had the degree I needed to compete for a commission. In 2019, I became an officer. A Mustang. Enlisted first, commissioned later. My mother did not attend that ceremony either. When I made captain, I sent her a card. No answer. I learned to stop expecting one. By 34, I supervised logistics supporting hundreds of Marines. I could track a serialized component across multiple units, reconstruct a broken shipping chain, and tell you exactly where accountability failed. But whenever I thought about my mother, I reduced 8 years of silence to one explanation. She hated what I had become. It fit the evidence I thought I had. That was the problem. I did not actually have evidence. I had Brooke. Estrangement is a strange word because it sounds cleaner than what it feels like. It suggests two people walked away from each other. That was not what I believed had happened. I thought my mother had walked away from me. In 2017, after I made staff sergeant and my pay finally stopped feeling temporary, Brooke called one evening and mentioned that Mom's hours at the clinic had been cut. I asked what she needed. Brooke hesitated. You know she'd never take money directly from you. That sounded exactly like Margaret Barrett. Proud enough to sit in a cold house before admitting she needed help. Brooke suggested opening a separate account for Mom's expenses. She would manage the bills so Mom would never have to feel like she was accepting charity from the son whose career she hated. The account was called Margaret Barrett Support. I set up an automatic transfer. $675 on the first of every month. It was not enough to change anyone's life, but it should have covered groceries, utilities, prescriptions, and the small emergencies that always appeared when money was already tight. The first transfer cleared. Then the second. Then the next 94. For 8 years, I never missed one. I sent birthday cards too. Mother's Day flowers. A note when I was commissioned. Another when I made captain. I never received a reply. Not even an angry one. That hurt more than I admitted. Anger would have meant she was reading. Silence felt like deletion. Every time I tried to reach her directly, Brooke was there. I called the house on Mom's birthday one year. Brooke answered. She's asleep. Bad migraine. After my commissioning, I called again. Brooke told me Mom had seen a picture online. It upset her, Cole. You know what the uniform does to her. Twice a year, Brooke would offer me just enough information to keep me from forcing the issue. Mom liked the flowers. Mom's back was better. Mom asked about the weather near Quantico. Mom was not ready to talk. Those scraps mattered to me more than they should have. They convinced me there was still some relationship buried underneath the silence. In 2021, I finally bought a ticket home. No warning. No permission. I planned to drive to Fenwick Street, sit at that kitchen table, and stay there until my mother told me herself that she wanted me gone. 9 days before the trip, my unit received deployment orders. The visit disappeared under 9 months of work. When I returned, Brooke told me Mom had torn up the letter I sent while I was overseas. She didn't even finish reading it. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with the phone against my ear and saying nothing. Erin was not in my life yet. There was nobody beside me to ask the obvious question. Did you see her tear it up? I never asked. That is the part one own. I worked in logistics. I distrusted single-source reporting professionally. If one person controlled every piece of information in a supply chain, I called it a vulnerability. Yet every fact I believed about my mother came through Brooke. And every fact my mother believed about me was apparently traveling through the same route. For 8 years, my sister never locked the door between us. She did something smarter. She stood in the doorway and told each of us the other person had already closed it. I met Erin Walsh because her squadron paperwork was wrong. That is not the version either of us tells at parties, but it is the true one. I was reviewing an aviation cargo manifest at Cherry Point when I found a weight discrepancy large enough to stop the load. Erin, then a major flying KC-130JS, came down to find out why her aircraft was still on the ground. She looked at my worksheet, checked her squadron copy, and said, "You're right. Ours is wrong." No argument. No excuse. No attempt to make being wrong somebody else's fault. I remember thinking that was unusually attractive. 3 years later, she proposed in our kitchen while I was making eggs. No photographer, no hidden family. She held out a ring beside the stove and said, "We coordinate deployments better than most people coordinate dinner. Want to keep doing this permanently?" I said yes before she finished smiling. We chose the chapel at Quantico because both of our careers had crossed through that base. About 180 people were expected: Marines, pilots, friends, Erin's relatives, and a handful of people from my side who had remained separate from the disaster between my mother and me. Margaret was not invited. Erin asked me once, "Are you sure?" I thought about 8 years of silence. The cards Brooke said Mom had rejected. The phone calls that never reached her. The letter I had been told she tore apart. You can't invite someone who doesn't want to know you exist. Erin did not argue. But 2 months before the wedding, I mailed my mother one card anyway. Cream envelope, blue ink. "I'm getting married in June. I wanted you to hear it from me first." No invitation. No demand. Just one unlocked door. Nothing came back. By the wedding morning, I had stopped checking. Marco Ruiz, my best man, was fighting with his tie when the wedding coordinator stepped into the preparation room holding a clipboard. "Final numbers," she said. "Bride side confirmed. Groom side, 2 family visitor clearances approved. Everything's good." I looked up. "To what?" "Family guests. Approved Tuesday." "I don't have family guests coming." She glanced at the sheet. For the first time that morning, something felt wrong. Who submitted them? I can pull the request after the ceremony. Normally, I would have stopped everything and traced it immediately. Manifest discrepancies were my job. But the organ began. Someone called 5 minutes. Marco put a hand on my shoulder. "You want me to handle it?" I looked toward the chapel doors. I had spent enough of my life letting family occupy space they had not earned. No. After. That decision bought me 23 minutes of peace. Erin came down the aisle. For a while, there was nothing except her. We reached the vows. She had both my hands. The chaplain was speaking about commitment during good years and bad ones when the rear doors slammed open. Every head turned. My mother stood at the end of the aisle. Gray coat. Hair thinner than I remembered. Face pale with something that looked like rage until I saw the fear underneath it. For one absurd second, I was 12 again. She came. Then Margaret started walking. Nobody stopped her because nobody yet understood what they were watching. She reached us and stared at my dress blues. Then at Erin. Then at the rows of uniforms filling the chapel. "You did it," she said. "Mom. You gave them everything." Her hands were shaking. "What are you talking about?" "Your whole life. To the same people who took Mick." The room disappeared around us. "Mom, nobody took. You're celebrating them on his weekend." That stopped me. There was no tribute to Mick. There was no special military toast. His death anniversary was not part of our ceremony at all. I had just begun to understand that my mother had arrived carrying information I had never given her when she stepped forward. The slap came hard enough to turn my head. My lips split against my teeth. Copper filled my mouth. A drop of blood struck the white collar beneath my coat. 180 people became completely silent. Margaret stared at her hand. Erin stepped between us. "Ma'am, step away from my husband." Her voice was so calm it made the moment feel even sharper. PMO personnel were already moving from the side aisle. My mother did not resist when they took her arms. She only looked past Erin toward me. And that was when I knew something was wrong beyond the assault. She was not looking at me like someone who had finally punished a son she hated. She looked horrified by what she had just done. As security turned her toward the doors, movement flickered behind the vestibule glass. Dark ponytail. Familiar profile. Brooke. She saw me looking. Then she turned and walked away. The wedding coordinator's words returned to me. 2 family visitor clearances approved. My mother had not found Quantico by accident. Someone had brought her there. We finished the wedding. That part surprises people. About 40 minutes after PMO escorted my mother out, Erin and I stood in a small side room, while Marco held a cold pack against my mouth and a staff sergeant took my statement. Because the assault happened on a federal installation, nobody treated it like family drama. There was a report. There was a citation. There would be a hearing. Margaret was barred from returning to Quantico. Erin looked at the blood on my collar and asked, "What do you want to do?" I thought about the chapel full of people waiting outside. "She doesn't get to keep the day." Erin nodded. "Then we finish it." So we did. I got married with a swollen lip. Outside, Marines raised swords over us. People laughed again. Photographers worked around the bloodstain. For a few hours, I almost managed to believe the worst part was over. Marco ruined that illusion before the reception ended. He found me near the back entrance holding a photocopy. "Cole." One look at his face told me this was not about cake. "The visitor request." He handed it over. The pre-clearance had been submitted 4 days earlier through the wedding portal. 2 civilian IDs had been uploaded. Margaret Barrett. Brooke Barrett. Under family contact was an email address I had never seen. BarrettFamilyGuest@protonmail.com. Under callback number was something I knew immediately. The landline at my mother's house in Salem. I read the page again. Brooke had not entered the chapel. Only Margaret had. But both had been cleared. Aaron came beside me. So, somebody planned for both of them to be here. Yes. And only your mother went inside. Yes. That night, instead of doing anything romantic, Aaron and I sat on the hotel bed with 2 laptops open between us. We can be furious later, she said. Right now we verify. That became the rule. The wedding coordinator confirmed the request had included scans of both IDs and identified Brooke as the family point of contact. Then I called Aaron's cousin Rebecca, who had been sitting near the rear of the chapel. I asked if she had seen anyone with my mother before the doors opened. Rebecca went quiet. There was another woman in the vestibule. What did she look like? Early 30s, dark ponytail. She was standing behind your mom with both hands on her shoulders. My stomach tightened. What was she saying? I didn't hear everything. Anything you remember? Rebecca hesitated. She kept telling her, "You're the only one who ever stood up for Mick." And something about you turning the wedding into a tribute to the Corps on his weekend. I closed my eyes. There had been no tribute. No speech about Mick. No military toast. Nothing remotely resembling what my mother had screamed at me. Rebecca continued. Right before the doors opened, the younger woman said, "If you let him do this without saying anything, then nobody ever defended Mick." That was enough. My mother had brought the grief. Brooke had supplied the target. She had completed the online process, driven 3.5 hours, fed Margaret a version of my wedding that did not exist, walked her to the chapel door, and disappeared before security arrived. But one question mattered more than how. Why? Brooke had spent 8 years keeping my mother and me apart. Bringing us into the same room should have been the one thing she wanted to avoid. Unless she believed the meeting would destroy whatever was left between us permanently. So I went home and did what I should have done years earlier. I started auditing the information chain. I started with a legal pad. Not money. Information. Every fact I believed about my mother from the previous 8 years went on the left side of the page. Mom was asleep when I called. Source, Brooke. Mom saw my commissioning photo and got upset. Source, Brooke. Mom's back was better. Source, Brooke. Mom tore up my letter. Source, Brooke. Mom liked the flowers, but wasn't ready to talk. Source, Brooke. By the time I reached the bottom of the first page, every line ended with the same name. I had spent my career treating single-source reporting as a vulnerability. My own family history had one source. Brooke. So I stopped asking her. The first person I called was Nora Whitcomb. Nora had lived across from my mother since before I started elementary school. She taught piano for decades, knew which neighborhood kids had married badly, which houses needed new roofs, and somehow remembered every birthday without using Facebook. She sounded delighted to hear from me. Then I asked about Margaret. The warmth left her voice. Cole, sweetheart, what exactly do you think your mother believes about you? I stared at the legal pad. That I chose the Marines over her. A long silence. She thinks you abandoned her. The words did not land immediately. What? She tells the women at church that you haven't called in years. Says you never send cards. Says after you became an officer, you were too busy for family. I stood up without realizing it. Nora, I send her something every birthday. Another silence. I've never seen any of it. I walked to the kitchen window. What about money? What money? That was the moment everything shifted. I asked whether Mom was doing okay financially. Nora made a sad little sound. Last winter, she kept the thermostat so low, I brought her a space heater. She wore that gray coat inside for almost a month because she was afraid of the heating bill. $675. Every month. For 96 months. I opened the banking app while Nora continued talking. The transfers were there. Cleared. One after another. Margaret Barrett support. Total sent. $64,800. My mother had been sitting inside a cold house, while nearly $65,000 supposedly meant for her had vanished somewhere between my account and her front door. Nora, I said, has Brooke been paying Mom's bills? She tells everyone she has. Of course she did. Brooke was not simply the messenger between us. She had positioned herself as the daughter carrying the entire burden while her military brother disappeared. Before ending the call, Nora said something quietly. Your mother still keeps a picture of you in uniform in the hallway. I closed my eyes. She does. She complains about that uniform every time she walks past it. That sounded more like my mother than hatred ever had. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Brooke. Please don't drag Nora into family business. She's getting older and confused. Half of what she says isn't reliable anymore. I read the message twice. I had not told Brooke I called Nora. Maybe Nora mentioned it to another neighbor. Salem could move information faster than any military network I had ever worked with. But Brooke's reaction mattered more than how she found out. She did not ask why I called. She attacked the witness. Discredit the source. Close the border. I looked again at the $64,800 total. 8 years of transfers. 8 years of silence. And suddenly I knew what I needed next. Not another conversation. Records. Records do not protect feelings. And they do not forget where money went. Aaron and I drove to Salem 2 days later. 3.5 hours south. 1 thermos of coffee, 1 folder of bank statements, and an agreement that we would not go to my mother's house until we knew what we were walking into. We parked 2 streets away from Fenwick and went to Nora's first. She opened the door before I knocked twice. For a moment, she only looked at my face. The swelling from the wedding was mostly gone. The cut inside my lip was not. Nora did not ask about it. She hugged me instead. Then she fed us lemon bars at the same dining room table where she had taught half the neighborhood to play piano. We talked about Mom. About the heating bills. About Brooke. Then Nora became quiet. There's something I should show you. She disappeared down the hallway. When she returned, she was carrying an old cardboard box. The corners had softened with age. Dust had settled into the tape. Across one side, in my mother's handwriting, was one word. Mick. My throat tightened. What is that doing here? Your mother gave it to me years ago. Nora set it carefully on the table. After Michael died, she couldn't have his things in the house. She couldn't throw them away either. She asked me to keep the box until she was ready. Did she ever come back for it? Nora shook her head. Then she added something that changed the temperature in the room. Brooke brought things over sometimes. I looked at her. What things? Envelopes. Cards. She'd say your mother found something else she couldn't bear looking at and asked me to put it with Michael's things. How often? I don't know. Once or twice a year, maybe. Aaron and I looked at each other. Did you ever open them? Of course not. I carried the box outside. I could not open it in Nora's house. We sat in the car beneath a maple tree, the home I grew up in less than 2 blocks away. I cut the tape with my pocket knife. The first thing inside was the folded flag from Mick's funeral. Beneath it were his medals, several photographs, and a cheap watch I remembered him wearing when I was a kid. Then I found the envelope. It was addressed to Margaret Barrett. The postmark was from 2004, 3 weeks before Mick died. The seal was unbroken. I held it for a long time. Mom had spent more than 20 years hating everything that uniform represented while refusing to open one of the last things her brother had ever sent her. I opened it. Most of the letter was ordinary. Mick complained about dust. He joked about the food. He asked whether Brooke still cheated at board games and whether I was still walking around with my shoulders folded forward. Then near the bottom, the tone changed. He wrote that he knew Margaret was afraid for him. That fear was part of loving somebody who served. But he did not want that fear inherited by the children. If either Brooke or I ever chose military service, he wanted Mom to let the choice belong to us. He wrote that she should not make us carry the fear she carried for him. And then, if Cole ever wears this uniform, tell him I said to stand tall. I'd be proud he chose for himself. I stopped reading. Aaron's hand came down over mine. For years, I had believed my career was the final insult to a dead man my mother worshipped. Mick had thought the opposite. My mother simply never knew. I cried then. Not loudly. I bent over the steering wheel with the letter in my hands and let 14 years of something I had never named leave my body. Eventually, I folded the paper back along its original creases. Aaron looked into the box. Cole. Her voice had changed. I followed her eyes. Under the metal tin was a bundle of envelopes secured with 2 rubber bands. Cream. White. 1 pale blue. I knew the handwriting before I touched them. Mine. My captain promotion announcement. Birthday cards. Mother's Day cards. Holiday notes. Letters sent from deployments. And near the top, the cream envelope I had mailed 2 months before the wedding. I'm getting married in June. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Still sealed. Every one of them. I took the rubber bands off and counted. Years of my voice. Never opened. Never rejected. Never even received. Brooke had been taking my mail before Mom could see it, then carrying it across the street and hiding it in the one box Margaret Barrett would never willingly open. She had not needed to destroy anything. She had found a better hiding place. Grief. That was when the structure finally became visible. My mother had not ignored me for 8 years. She had been told I never wrote. I had not been rejected for 8 years. I had been told she rejected everything. Every road between us had been routed through one person. And that person had been standing at the mailbox year after year, recognizing my handwriting and making the same decision over and over again. That was not panic. That was procedure. I repacked the box carefully. Aaron started the car. What now? I looked toward Fenwick Street. Now we find out where the money went. Because if Brooke had been willing to steal 8 years of words from my mother, I no longer believed the $64,800 had gone where she said either. Before touching the bank account, I needed to know what I was actually looking at. Back at Quantico, Aaron and I sat across from Lieutenant Commander Maya Chun at the legal assistant's office and put everything on her desk. The assault report. The visitor clearance request. The photograph of Brooke's ID attached to it. 96 bank transfers. And the box containing 8 years of unopened letters. Maya read quietly for several minutes. Then she took a pencil and drew 3 lines across a legal pad. Stop thinking of this as one problem, she said. It isn't. She tapped the first line. Lane 1. Your mother assaulted you on federal property. That case moves through the magistrate system. You're the victim, so your statement matters, but you don't control the prosecution. I nodded. She's 62. No record. None. And you believe she was deliberately manipulated before the assault. I can document how she got there. I can't prove what was in her head. That's the right answer. Maya wrote something down. A first-time defendant with strong mitigating circumstances may have options that emphasize counseling and compliance instead of a permanent conviction. But nobody gets to pretend the slap didn't happen. I don't want that. Good. She tapped the second line. Lane 2. The money. $64,800 sent over 8 years to an account you believed existed for your mother's care. Yes. You need beneficiary verification and transaction documentation. Do not confront Brooke before you know whose account it legally is. Third line. Lane 3. Authority over your mother's property. Power of attorney, deed records, liens, loans, anything recorded against the house. I frowned. I don't know of any loans. That doesn't mean there aren't any. She pushed the pad toward me. Information control, money control, property control. When those 3 appear around one vulnerable family member, you document before you accuse. That sentence followed me home. Brooke called Sunday afternoon. Her voice was warm. Too warm. She gave me updates about Mom as though nothing had happened. Mom had eaten breakfast. Mom was embarrassed. Mom was barely sleeping. Then, almost casually, have you talked to anyone about getting the court thing dropped? I've talked to legal. A small pause. Okay, good. Just, she can't handle a criminal record, Cole. I know. Another pause. Then she asked the question that changed the entire call. Also, now that you're married and everything, are you keeping Mom's monthly support going? I looked at Aaron across the table. She stopped writing. Brooke continued quickly. I just need to know for budgeting. For Mom. In 8 years, she had never once discussed the money openly with me after setting up the account. Now my mother had a federal court date approaching, and Brooke's first concrete question was whether the payments would continue. The $675, I asked. Yes. She depends on it. Obviously. I stared at the stack of unopened letters. At Nora's note about my mother wearing a coat inside because she was afraid of the heating bill. Should I keep sending it? I asked. Yes, Brooke said immediately. Too fast. Then she softened her voice. Please, don't make Mom suffer because you're angry at me. There it was. The pipeline mattered. Maybe more than the assault. Maybe more than the wedding. I wrote down the exact time of the call and the words she used. Then I told Brooke what she wanted to hear. I haven't decided anything yet. She exhaled. Okay, just let me handle Mom. The same instruction she had given me for 8 years. All roads through Brooke. Only now, for the first time, I knew there was money running underneath them. The county records office in Salem smelled like toner, dust, and old paper. Maya had told me exactly what to request. Anything recorded against the Fenwick Street property. Any power of attorney involving Margaret Barrett. Any deed of trust, lien, or secured loan. 25 minutes later, I was sitting at a narrow wooden table with the legal history of my mother's house spread out in front of me. The first document was dated 3 years earlier. Durable power of attorney. Principal, Margaret Barrett. Attorney in fact, Brooke Barrett. I checked the signature page twice. Mom had signed it during the period after her cataract surgery. I remembered Brooke mentioning that surgery. Mom could barely read for a few weeks. Brooke had told me she was helping with prescriptions, appointments, and bills. On paper, the authority was much broader. Banking. Property transactions. Loans. Contracts. The second document was recorded 8 months later. A deed of trust against the Fenwick Street house. $72,000. Brooke had executed it as attorney in fact for Margaret. I stared at the amount. My father had paid that house off years before his death. No mortgage. No rent. The one financial certainty my mother should have had was the roof over her head. Brooke had borrowed against it. Then I reached the third document. Notice of default. Filed 7 weeks earlier. 3 missed payments. The language below, it was clinical and indifferent. If the default was not cured, foreclosure proceedings could follow. I sat there for several minutes. My mother was worried about heating bills in a house she supposedly owned outright. I had sent $64,800 for her care. And now the house itself was sliding toward foreclosure. The question was no longer whether Brooke had taken my money. The question was how much of our mother's life she had converted into debt. Over the next few days, the rest of Brooke's situation came together in pieces. Her divorce had left her raising Owen while carrying credit card debt from the marriage. Then came the boutique. She opened it believing she could turn a small online clothing business into something permanent. The lease, inventory, advertising, and merchant debt grew faster than sales. It lasted less than a year. By the time it failed, Brooke was underwater. I could see how the first bad decision might have happened. Take a few hundred from Mom's support account. Replace it next month. Use the power of attorney to cover one emergency. Tell yourself the business will recover. Then the business does not recover. The debt grows. The next lie becomes necessary to protect the previous one. I understood that progression. Understanding it did not make any of it acceptable. Brooke had not accidentally hidden 8 years of letters. She had not accidentally told Mom I never sent money. She had not accidentally told me Mom wanted nothing from me. Every honest conversation between Margaret and me threatened the structure holding Brooke's life together. One question could have destroyed it. Mom, are you getting the money? One answer. What money? That was why the border had to remain closed. The mail. The phone calls. The stories. The visitor clearance. Even the wedding. Brooke had spent years making sure my mother and I never occupied the same reality long enough to compare notes. The slap was supposed to finish what the silence had started. Instead, it forced me to check the paperwork. The hearing was 21 days away when I opened the formal dispute with my bank. I brought everything. 96 ACH transfers. The account title I had been given. Brooke's original instructions from 2017. Copies of my own statements showing $675 leaving on the first business day of every month. I was not asking the bank to give me Brooke's private transaction history. I was asking a narrower question. Had the money I sent for Margaret Barrett's support ever been deposited into an account Margaret actually owned or controlled? The bank's fraud department requested documentation from the receiving institution. Maya helped me keep the request inside the right lane. No accusations. No threats. Verify the beneficiary. 3 business days later, I received the answer. I sat in my truck outside the branch and opened the secure message twice before I believed it. The destination account had one legal owner. Brooke Barrett. Margaret Barrett was not a joint owner. She was not an authorized signer. She had no withdrawal authority. Her Social Security number was not attached to the account. The words Margaret Barrett support had only been a nickname Brooke used when she gave me the transfer information. My mother could not have taken a single dollar from the account, even if someone had told her it existed. $64,800. 8 years. Not one payment had ever landed somewhere she could touch. I rested both hands on the steering wheel. There are discoveries that feel explosive. This one felt mechanical. A final piece sliding into place. The cold house. The unpaid heating bills. Brooke's insistence that Mom depended on the money. The intercepted letters. The mortgage. The visitor clearance. None of them were separate problems anymore. They were parts of the same system. From that moment forward, I knew Brooke had been lying. Brooke did not know I knew. That difference mattered. My phone buzzed before I started the engine. You're in Salem? I stared at the message. Somebody had seen my truck. That was all it took in a town where 3 streets of distance counted as news. I answered with the first deliberate lie I had told my sister in years. Visited Dad's grave. Didn't want to make it a whole family thing. Heading back tonight. 3 dots appeared immediately. That's sweet. You okay? Then, right on schedule. Don't stop by Mom's. She's having a really bad week. Seeing you right now would set her back. I almost laughed. I was 2 miles from the woman Brooke had spent 8 years telling me did not want me. And even now, with a federal hearing approaching and the money trail beginning to collapse, Brooke's first instinct was the same. Control access. Control information. Keep us apart. I typed. Understood. Then I drove to the cemetery. Not because Brooke deserved the lie to become partially true. Because I had not visited my father in years. I stood in front of his marker for 10 minutes with the bank confirmation folded inside my jacket. I should have checked sooner, I said. The wind moved through the trees. There was no answer. Of course there wasn't. But saying it mattered. I had spent years blaming my mother for silence I had never verified. Now I had 21 days before she stood in federal court for hitting me. 21 days to make sure that when she entered that room, she finally heard the whole story from someone who was not Brooke. And this time, every sentence would have paperwork behind it. The night before the hearing, Aaron and I turned our dining table into a briefing room. Folders in the center, index cards along the edge, bank verification on top, county records behind it, the visitor clearance request, copies of the unopened letters, and one separate envelope containing Mick's letter. Aaron tapped the table with a pen. Tomorrow is not about Brooke. I know. Say it anyway. I looked at the stack. It's not about destroying Brooke. That mattered because anger had become the easiest emotion available to me. She had intercepted my mail, redirected $64,800, borrowed against our mother's house, and delivered Margaret to my wedding carrying a lie sharp enough to become violence. Wanting Brooke to hurt would have been understandable. It also would have been useless. Aaron slid an index card toward me. What is the mission? I pictured Margaret standing in federal court. 62 years old, no criminal history, a woman who had still slapped me in front of 180 witnesses. I was not going to pretend that had not happened. But I also knew she had been manipulated for years by the person she trusted most. Mom leaves that courthouse with the truth, I said. Aaron nodded. And if there's a lawful way for the assault case to end with counseling and conditions instead of a permanent conviction, I support it. The house. Protected if possible. And Brooke. She gets whatever the evidence earns her. Aaron waited. I knew why. Owen does not become collateral. My 9-year-old nephew had not taken the money. He had not hidden the letters. He had not driven Margaret to Quantico. Whatever happened to Brooke, I would not help turn her son into the next child paying for an adult's choices. Aaron wrote Owen across the top card and placed it above everything else. Then she said the same thing she told younger pilots when something went wrong in the cockpit. Fly the aircraft, not the emergency. Meaning, do not chase the explosion. Execute the plan. At 6 the next morning, we loaded the folders into the car. For the first time in 8 years, Brooke would not control what my mother heard. Paper would. And I intended to make sure every page spoke clearly. Federal courthouses are designed to make everyone feel smaller than the system around them. By 8:30 that morning, Aaron and I were through security and sitting on a wooden bench outside the magistrate courtroom in Alexandria. I wore service alphas. Not because I wanted rank to do the talking for me. Because I was coming directly from duty, and because for once I was finished hiding parts of my life to make my mother comfortable. Margaret arrived 10 minutes later. Same gray coat. Brooke beside her. My mother looked thinner than she had at the wedding. Brooke held her elbow as they crossed the hallway. At first, I thought she was supporting her. Then I noticed the difference. Every time Margaret looked somewhere Brooke did not want her to look, Brooke leaned in and whispered. Guiding. Managing. Steering. Then Mom saw me. Her eyes stopped on the uniform. For half a second, something opened in her expression. Recognition. Pain. Maybe even relief. Brooke immediately said something into her ear. Mom looked away. That hurt more than I expected. The case was called shortly after 9. Margaret stood beside appointed counsel while the government summarized what had happened at Quantico. Simple assault on federal property. 1 strike. 1 injured victim. Multiple witnesses. No dispute that it happened. The magistrate asked whether I wished to provide a victim statement. I stood. Captain Cole Barrett, Your Honor. I'm the victim. I'm also Margaret Barrett's son. My mother looked at me again. I walked to the lectern with the folder Aaron and I had built the night before. I'm not here to tell the court my mother didn't hit me, I said. She did. I'm asking the court to consider what was happening around her before she did. The magistrate nodded once. I started with the money. For 8 years, I transferred $675 every month for my mother's support. I placed the summary page with the victim witness coordinator. 96 transfers, $64,800. Margaret frowned. I turned toward her. Mom, that money was supposed to be paying your utilities, groceries, prescriptions, whatever you needed. Her face went blank. What money? Brooke moved beside her. Mom. The defense attorney touched Margaret's arm. Let him finish. I continued. The receiving account was represented to me as Margaret Barrett support. The bank has since confirmed my mother was never an owner, signer, or authorized user. I submitted the verification. The sole owner was Brooke Barrett. The courtroom remained quiet. Real courtrooms do not gasp on cue. But people do look. The magistrate looked toward Brooke. The government attorney did too. Margaret shook her head. No, Brooke told me he never sent anything. My chest tightened. 8 years compressed into 1 sentence. I opened the next section. My mother believed I abandoned her. I believe she rejected every attempt I made to contact her. We now have reason to believe both stories were maintained by the same person. I showed the photographs of the unopened envelopes. Birthday cards. Mother's Day cards. Deployment letters. Promotion announcements. The wedding card. All of these were recovered from a box stored with a neighbor. Margaret stared. I lifted the cream envelope. This one was mailed 2 months before the wedding. Her eyes filled. I never saw it. I know. Brooke stood abruptly. This is insane. The magistrate looked over her glasses. Ma'am, sit down. Brooke sat. I moved to the property records. 3 years ago, my mother signed a durable power of attorney while recovering from cataract surgery. 8 months later, a $72,000 loan was secured against her home using that authority. Margaret turned toward Brooke. What loan? Brooke's face changed. Not fear exactly. Calculation. I continued. The property is now in default. My mother whispered, the house is paid off. It was. Brooke rose again. I used some of the money. Her lawyer, who had accompanied her only as a family observer and was not counsel in my mother's assault matter, grabbed her sleeve. But Brooke kept going. Somebody had to take care of everything. The magistrate's expression hardened. Ms. Barrett, you should stop speaking. Brooke was crying now. I was there. I paid bills. I drove her places. Cole got to disappear into the Marines, and send money like that made him a son. I said nothing. She was doing something I could never have forced. Talking past the point where the lie could survive. I was owed something, she said. Do you know what my life has been? The magistrate interrupted. That is enough. A court security officer moved closer. Brooke sat down. The magistrate turned back to me. Captain Barrett, are you alleging your sister committed financial crimes? No, Your Honor. I'm giving context relevant to my mother's condition and asking that these documents be preserved and referred to the appropriate authorities. Those issues should be investigated separately. That answer mattered. This was not Brooke's trial. I was not there to convert an assault hearing into one. I finished with the wedding. The pre-clearance request. The uploaded IDs. Brooke listed as family contact. The witness who saw her coaching Margaret in the vestibule. I believe my mother arrived at Quantico already convinced I was using my wedding to celebrate the institution she associates with her brother's death. That information was false. Margaret covered her mouth. The magistrate sat silently for several seconds. Then she addressed counsel. After a short recess, the government indicated it would consider a diversion-based resolution given Margaret's age, lack of record, the documented manipulation, and my request that accountability focus on counseling and compliance rather than punishment alone. The base debarment would remain. The assault would not disappear. But there was a path where my mother could accept responsibility without carrying a permanent conviction if she completed the conditions. Then the magistrate ordered copies of the financial documents preserved and directed the victim witness office to make the appropriate referrals. Adult Protective Services. Local financial investigators. The bank fraud unit. Brooke stared at me as though I had destroyed her. I had not. I had simply stopped allowing her to be the only person telling the story. When the hearing ended, Margaret remained beside the defense table. She looked at the unopened envelopes. Then at me. 8 years. Yes. Her voice broke. All of them. All of them. I still had one envelope left. The only one I had not given the court. Mix. The hallway outside the courtroom was almost empty by the time everything slowed down. Brooke had been taken into another conference room after the referrals were made. Margaret remained with her appointed attorney and a victim services coordinator who was explaining the diversion process. Counseling. No further incidents. Compliance with every court condition. The Quantico ban would remain. If she completed the program successfully, there was a path forward without a permanent conviction. Mom listened like someone trying to learn a language while standing inside an earthquake. Then Maya arrived with local legal aid paperwork. The power of attorney came first. Margaret stared at the document, granting Brooke control over her finances and property. I thought that was for my eye surgery. That may have been how it was explained, Maya said. But the authority is broader than that. Mom looked at me. I did not say I told you so. There was nothing satisfying about being right anymore. Maya explained the revocation. Margaret signed 3 copies. Her hand shook on the first. By the third, it did not. That was the first financial decision I had watched my mother make with complete information in years. Afterward, I asked if I could speak to her alone. Her attorney nodded and moved several feet away. Erin stayed near the windows. Close enough if I needed her. Far enough that this belonged to my mother and me. I took the last envelope from my folder. Mom recognized the handwriting before I said anything. Her face lost color. Mick. Yes. She reached for it, then stopped. Where did you get that? The box you left with Nora. Her eyes closed. I couldn't open it. I know. I kept thinking I would. I know. She looked down at the envelope. Did you read it? Yes. That hurt her. I could see it. But 20 years of protecting the letter from grief had already cost us too much. You need to read it now. She broke the seal slowly. For several minutes, the courthouse hallway disappeared around her. Her eyes moved over mixed complaints about the heat, the food, Brooke cheating at games, me slouching through adolescence. Then she reached the final section. Her lips stopped moving. She read it again. Then aloud, barely above a whisper. If Cole ever wears this uniform, tell him I said to stand tall. I'd be proud he chose for himself. Her hand dropped. I watched 20 years of certainty collapse across my mother's face. No. I said nothing. He knew. He knew I might choose it someday. She shook her head. I thought he hated being there. He was scared sometimes. That isn't the same thing. I blamed it. The core. Yes. Her eyes moved to my uniform. I blamed that uniform for taking him. I know. And then you wore it. Yes. She covered her mouth. I thought you were choosing it over me. I thought you chose your grief over me. The sentence hurt both of us. That was probably why it was true. Mom looked back at the letter. Brooke told me you never wrote. I know. She said you stopped sending anything after you became an officer. I know. She said the wedding was some kind of tribute to the Marines, that you were doing it on mixed weekend because you wanted to prove a point. I know. Her face folded. Not dramatically. Her knees simply stopped cooperating. I caught her before she hit the floor. For the first time since I was 18, my mother let me hold her. She pressed her forehead into my shoulder and cried against the uniform she had spent years believing represented everything she had lost. I hate you for it, she said. I tightened my arm around her. You were wrong. I was. I needed her to say that. Not because I wanted to win. Because rebuilding anything on top of another lie would only restart the same cycle. After a while, she pulled back. I don't know how to fix 8 years. Neither do I. Do you even want me to try? I thought about the slap. The unopened letters. The money. The gray coat in the chapel. And the woman standing in front of me now, finally hearing information without Brooke standing between us. Yes, I said, but slowly. She nodded. No shortcuts. No intermediaries. That almost made her smile. I handed her the bundle of my unopened letters. Start with these. She held them against her chest. Then looked down at Mick's letter again. He would have been proud of you. For 14 years, I had told myself I did not need to hear that from anyone. Maybe I did. I looked at my mother. He wanted you to be proud too. She cried again. This time, neither of us looked away. What happened to Brooke after the hearing was not dramatic. There were no handcuffs in the courthouse hallway. No screaming press conference. No moment where everyone suddenly understood what she had done and agreed on what she deserved. Real consequences were slower. Adult Protective Services opened a case involving my mother's finances. The bank froze the support account once the dispute documentation was complete. The lender paused foreclosure activity while the $72,000 loan and power of attorney transactions were reviewed. Brooke hired an attorney. For the first time in years, she was answering questions from people she could not redirect with tears. Where did the money go? Why was Margaret's name used for an account she did not control? Why were support payments deposited into Brooke's personal account? Why had the house been pledged as collateral? And why had our mother been told for years that I had provided nothing? The investigation eventually produced a restitution agreement and supervised financial conditions instead of the cinematic ending people imagined these stories should have. Brooke moved into an apartment across town. She began making scheduled restitution payments. She lost authority over Mom's finances completely. The house remained under legal review, but foreclosure was stopped while the disputed loan was restructured. I did not rescue Brooke. I also did not try to destroy her. There is a difference. She called me once after her attorney began negotiating. She was crying before I answered. You've taken everything. No. You turned Mom against me. No. You don't know what it was like raising Owen alone while you were gone playing Marine. There was the old story again. My career is abandonment. Her choice is a sacrifice. I know you were struggling, I said. You know nothing. I know enough to understand how taking the first $100 could have felt temporary. She went quiet. And I know you had 95 more chances to stop. Her breathing changed. That money should have been mine anyway. I was the one there. It was for Mom. I took care of her. You also kept her poor enough to believe nobody else did. She started crying harder. For years, that sound had worked on me. This time, it did not change the facts. Then she said Owen's name. That was the one place I would not let the conversation go. Listen carefully. She stopped. Whatever happens between you and me does not happen to Owen. Silence. He keeps his relationship with Grandma if she wants it. I'm not telling him what to think about you. I'm not making him choose sides. And I am not using him to punish you. You think you're better than me. No, I think he's 9. That was all. Brooke tried another route. Can you at least talk to Mom for me? No. Cole. No intermediaries, remember? The words hit differently now. For 8 years, she had been the intermediary. Now she wanted me to become one for her. This is not a negotiation, I said. It's a boundary. Then I ended the call. Mom and I did not suddenly become close. We met once a month at a diner off Route 11. Neutral ground. No surprise visits. No pretending the slap never happened. No pretending 8 missing years could be repaired over coffee. She attended every counseling session required by the diversion agreement. She learned her own online banking password. She reviewed every bill herself. The first time she showed me a utility statement and said, almost proudly, I paid this one online, I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny. Because at 62, my mother was learning what financial independence looked like after years of believing dependence was love. Brooke lost access to the money. Margaret regained access to herself. and Owen remained exactly where he belonged, outside the blast radius. For months later, the numbers looked different. The house was safe. The disputed loan had been restructured under legal supervision, with Brooke's restitution payments tied to it. Margaret controlled her own accounts now. Nobody had power of attorney over her finances. Brooke lived across town. Owen still saw his grandmother. And Mom and I were still rebuilding. Slowly. That September, Aaron and I held a small vow renewal in our backyard. 12 people. Marco. Nora. A few friends. My mother. No military police. No visitor clearance forms. No one waiting in a parking lot to tell somebody what they were supposed to feel. I wore my dress blues again. Aaron asked whether that bothered me. No. The jacket had been professionally cleaned after the wedding. You could not see where my blood had stained the white collar anymore. I could. Mom could too. Before the ceremony, she stood beside me staring at it. I'm sorry, she said. She had apologized before. This time I understood something. Rebuilding trust was not about hearing one perfect apology. It was watching somebody become trustworthy again through repetition. Counseling appointments. Bank statements. Direct phone calls. No Brooke between us. No convenient explanations. Receipts, basically. I had spent my whole career believing documentation was cold. Turns out sometimes documentation is how people learn to trust reality again. A month later, Mom and I were sitting at our usual diner when she asked me something she had never asked in 14 years. What was the day like when you made captain? I stopped with my coffee halfway to my mouth. You really want to know? Yes. So I told her. The hangar. The formation. The oath. Marco standing there trying not to smile. Aaron pinning one side of my rank while another officer pinned the other. How strange it felt being congratulated for something I had spent years assuming my own mother considered shameful. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, she rubbed her thumb along the handle of her coffee cup. Mick would have embarrassed you. I laughed. Absolutely. He would have yelled something stupid in front of everybody. Definitely. Then she looked at me. I would have liked to be there. That sentence did more for me than any dramatic apology could have. I drove home afterward with the windows down. For years, I thought standing tall meant shoulders back, chin level, never letting anyone see you bend. Mick meant something simpler. Choose your own life. Stand inside it without shrinking. My mother is learning to live without Brooke writing the story for her. I am learning not to confuse silence with strength. And after everything, the slap, the missing money, the intercepted letters, the courtroom, the blood on my uniform, I finally understand this. Standing tall was never about wearing the uniform. It was refusing to become smaller just because somebody else needed their version of me to fit.